bring down use of energy.
I'm going to simplify a bit and just talk about, how we're spending the $5 billion. Just over half of it is going to the portfolio we call market development, which is very much about energy efficiency and about, some related technologies like storage and other sources of on-site energy generation. The Green Bank is what we call technology agnostic, but in point of fact, just as a matter of fact, the monies in the Green Bank flow to investments that are especially investable, and at the moment, and I expect this to continue, energy efficiency dominates the investments that we're making and the pipeline that we are seeing. Research and innovation is playing. Yeah.
Can I interrupt you, Mr. because our time? I've got one minute left. I'm talking about insulating homes. I'm talking about weatherization. Decreasing demand by getting everyone properly weatherized. How many homes out there have no insulation in them?
Right, so that is the priority of the Market Development Initiative. It's not just our work. The utilities are doing similar work, and there are other programs around the state that are doing that. It is an extremely important objective.
And shouldn't we be really front-loading all of that, saying for the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to get that first job done?
It has the biggest emphasis in what we're doing.
Thank you. One more question. When we're doing the cost-benefit analysis for REV, you said you wanted to look at when utility investments in alternative energies are more cost-beneficial than traditional investments. When you're making those cost-benefit analysis, are you looking at the the full cost of natural gas, the externalized cost of carbon, and where are we on that? I know when I asked the question at the round table, I was told that we're not going to use the federal standard, which the scientists are telling us is outdated. We need to look at the latest research from Dr. Howarth at Cornell, for instance, about the powerful 105 times in a 20-year window, the power of methane. Are we taking those externalized costs and putting them into the cost-benefit analysis?
Yes. In the cost-benefit analysis that the Commission approved last week, we are requiring the utilities to use the EPA number for environmental externality when they do their analysis. So we are including that in the cost-benefit analysis. The Commission also noted, however, when the clean energy standard comes in, and we actually see what the environmental costs are in New York, we will likely want to substitute that number as a more accurate number of environmental value because the purpose of the benefit cost analysis is to really look at the total value of a resource. So it includes the environmental costs, it includes avoided generation, avoided transmission, avoided distribution, et cetera.
So you're using the EPA number that the scientists are saying is outdated?
It's not outdated. It's the EPA number that it's the number that EPA uses. We felt we did in our evaluation and the comments we received, we felt that was the best number because that's the number the EPA uses and continues to evaluate.
I'm concerned about that from everything I've heard. Can I get more information? I'd love to see some of your thinking on this in writing.
Yes, be happy to do so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Little.
Thank you. President Rhodes, I wanted to ask a few things, if I could, in regard to charging stations. I am part of a Quebec, New York corridor group and have met with groups from Quebec, Montreal, particularly that area. And they have a lot more electric cars, at least they claim they do, than we do in New York State. But they do travel down the Northway, and the Northway runs right through my district. So my goal has been to try to see if we could find more charging stations, implementation of them, and incentives for other people to put them in. I did find an app. It's called Plug Share, and if you pull it up, it'll tell you where you are. There's a map, and I know that there are Price Choppers that have them, that some hotels.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had it on. Could you hear me anyway? Yeah.
I could hear you anyway.
Some hotels have them, some different places have been able to put them in. The governor's State of the State mentions $9 million expenditure for electric vehicle charging stations. I'd like to know if you could tell me if NYSERDA is paying for those, if they're going to be grant programs, if there's going to be a match, and if we're going to put them on public highways. We have 2 rest areas just south of exit 30 that I was hoping to have them on. There's nothing to do there other than to read the tourism brochures, and they could stay warm, but they would require the faster and more expensive charging stations. And I know the bigger charging stations have a big demand charge on them. So I did find one motel, by the way, in Lake Placid that has 2 Tesla charging stations at it, and but nobody knows they're there, you know, unless you get on this app and thing. So my question is, what will be the program? How will people be able to access this $9 million? And where are we going to put them? And how are we going to signage, you know, our highways to show people if you need to get off, there will be a charging station someplace. I would love to, you know, say, look at the app, but there are places in the Adirondacks where you don't have any cell coverage, so that's not going to work either. But anyway, I'm interested in this program and what you can tell me about it. And
So,
I assume you're going to be paying for it.
so the governor has declared an objective of 3,000 charging stations in the state, and of that, 1,800 are ours to deliver. We're on a pretty good pace. We're ahead of schedule. Our current number is around 1,250 charging stations that are deployed.
But that's out of last year's money. I mean, this $9 million expenditure is to come, right?
Is part of what will be spent on charging stations in this coming year, so, or in future years. So the form of it's an incentive. It's a cost share, and we try to be as clear as possible and as straightforward and easy to work with as possible in explaining how it is that one would go about and get the cost share. Typically, you know, it's the hosts that drive it, so it's the Wegmans or the Starbucks or the Price Chopper that goes and make it happen. I mentioned that we have the majority of the objective of 3,000. Our partner for the rest of it is NYPA, the New York Power Authority. They, you know, to the extent that we put them on highway rest areas in highway rest areas and the like, that tends to be more where NYPA is working. But we don't want to point fingers at each other. We're eager to kind of get the charging stations where they're needed most. And so I'm happy to talk to you about that, and especially to hear advice from you or from people who are speaking to you about how to create better awareness of where those are, because the whole point of a charging station is to reduce the need, the phenomenon they call range anxiety, right?
Yeah, I almost think we need to develop, you know, the sign, just a small sign that goes on the exits, right, so that people know if they get off there.
I have noted that suggestion.
Well, and then of this $9 million, how much will NYSERDA have to dispense in this coming budget?
I'll have to get back to you on the specific number.
Well, I'd like to have a meeting. And
yeah,
maybe
in any case,
sit down
yeah,
and come up with a program, but very, very important for the Canadian travel. You know, I mean, with the dollar, it hasn't been as big as it usually is, but nevertheless, they still come down on business, come down on tourism events and all, and they do have electric cars that I understand only go 80 miles before a charge, so.
We'll work on you with this.
Okay, thank you.
Engelbright, Assemblyman Engelbright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your testimony. We heard just a few moments ago an impassioned, and I respect the point of view, by the way, an impassioned argument for a balance in fuels in the state. And while I respect the economic argument, let me just add a different perspective. We had a hearing sequence that focused on climate change. And among the things that we learned was there were huge costs that have already been encumbered with storms, damage to infrastructure, erosion due to climate change, which is being driven by carbon-based fuels. And so just, with 34 inches of snow from a coastal storm empowered by an overheated Atlantic Ocean, think about the costs when you wonder, perhaps, whether or not the governor is moving in the right direction and how enthusiastic your agency should be in supporting the direction that he has decided to go in. I would argue that he's going in the right direction and that we should get to those threshold targets as soon as possible. That being said, one of the things that became clear from the hearings is that one of the most dangerous fuels is natural gas. We heard testimony from people with PhDs behind their names indicating that leaks from both poorly closed wells and from gas systems already in place could account for as much as 40% of the greenhouse gas impact, because natural gas is 100 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than CO2. Within that context, Audrey Ziebelman has provided us with a statement that says that your focus on natural gas safety has led to strengthening efforts. I was greatly encouraged to hear you say that, and wonder if safety includes the safety of our atmosphere, the safety of our residents so they don't drown in their apartments when we get superstorms, the safety of our infrastructure and our tax base, as well as the safety so that they don't blow up. I'm encouraged. I wonder if you could elaborate on it.
Certainly. So one of the areas of concern of the Commission is safety, but it also, one of the safety concerns is old infrastructure where we have bare steel pipe that is leak prone. And it's the leak prone pipe that we're worried that is also the problem when it comes to methane leakage. So one of the things that the Commission has done is that we've actually accelerated the replacement of leak prone pipe so that all the utilities will have programs in place to go from where it was, which was 60 or 70 years, down to 20 to 30 years. So we have an effort going on with all of the utilities to make sure that we're doing everything we can to replace that pipe with plastic fusion pipe, really, that will not have the same type of methane leakage.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator O'Meara.
Thank you. Thank you, President Rhodes, for your testimony and for being here. Can you outline for us what the differences are and what the plans are for incentives for solar between large-scale and residential or business-mounted systems, and where you see that progressing in the future? Because I've heard concerns about plans to cut back on the incentives for solar systems, particularly in residential environments.
So the existing incentive program, New York Sun, is focused on behind-the-meter deployment of solar. So that is on someone's property on the other side of the meter. They can still be quite large, I believe up to 2 megawatt, which is 10 acres. But they are not utility-scale solar, and I'll get back to that in a moment. The The solar incentives, as they were, as New York Sun was initiated under Governor Cuomo, laid out a program to provide incentives by size and by section of the state, and those incentives would step down over time as the market grew and as the industry made economic gains, and as a result, costs reduced. So in fact, it is an explicit part of the design and an incentive and a mechanism that is absolutely behind the success that solar has had in New York, that the incentives step down as volume targets are reached. And so this is not, this is part of the design, and the step downs are very clearly laid out to market participants, and this is an approach that has been embraced by the industry as a way of providing both long-term certainty and a compelling market for them to set up shop here and to really grow their business. And so the declining incentives are in fact the logic. We expected to get the kind of growth that we've gotten, 300%, and that kind of growth is the outcome of those incentives. Large-scale solar is different. It has to reach a much tougher economic objective. We actually are hopeful as we look at the technology trends that large solar will be part of the clean energy standard as those costs improve.
You mentioned New York Sun, and I believe it's been close to or exactly $1 billion from Clean Energy Fund. Out of that $5 billion, $1 billion of it is going to New York Sun, and is that accurate or close?
It's more or less accurate. The $5 billion includes some of the New York Sun funding is already in the past, so what's in the $5 billion is a little bit less than the $1 billion, but it's close enough.
Now, it seems from my review and information I've received that New York Sun program has primarily benefited the Hudson Valley and Long Island regions. What efforts are you taking to get that more geographically spread out through the state?
So one of the design elements, I explained that New York Sun is designed to have by geography, and in fact the incentives now and projected are higher upstate than they are downstate. So that is point one that addresses that. Point two is that one of the barriers to fast expansion of solar is what's called the interconnection issue, that once you have a project, you can connect it up to the grid. We, under Chair Ziebelman, we are convening with the utilities, with developers, in order to remove that as a set of bottlenecks. And we are actively considering other mechanisms that can make sure that New York Sun achieves its goals across the state. As you note, the early wins have been downstate. We are confident that's a matter of timing, not of ultimate success, but we are, we're trusting but verifying. We're working really hard to think about ways to increase success upstate.
Okay, if I could continue just for a minute?
Sure.
The next question relative to the renewables is storage technology. And I mean, what is your outlook on the advancement, the development? I know it was mentioned by the chairwoman about demonstration projects going in place, but that seems to be one of the barriers, certainly, that we have with the renewables is the storage capacity for when the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, and how we maintain that consistency of power demand. So where do you see storage technology at today, and what part of the Clean Energy Fund is going to be focused on that?
So storage is a big family of technologies. Some of it is ready for prime time, and the chemistries, effectively, that are ready for prime time are an explicit focus, I think I mentioned it in passing, of the market development portfolio. So we actively seek to provide incentives and technical assistance and quality assurance and proven practices and data that says you should go here, support for storage that's ready for prime time. We also know for a fact that there are storage chemistries that are on their way, and those are an explicit focus of our work in the innovation and research portfolio. I'll turn in a second to Chair Ziebelman, who can talk about the things that REV is doing to make solar, to recognize more value for solar, for storage, but specifically with respect to the bundling of solar and storage, which is just a natural combination for cost and for resilience reasons. That is something that we're actively developing programs around.
And what entity is going to be in the storage business? Is that going to be the utilities? Is that going to be private entities, or the actual generators themselves with the solar array? Yes. or the wind?
Yes.
Yes, and yes. So, yes. I think that the opportunities for storage under REV are tremendous. We have, in the Commission's order, one of the areas that we identified for utility investment is in really large-scale storage, such as batteries, that could help integrate wind and solar better because to address the intermittency issue. We also fully expect that as we change the market and we start valuing the ability of resources to respond quickly so they get revenue streams, people will start investing in storage themselves. I had the opportunity to visit really an independent real estate developer in New York City who is investing a great deal. They're putting battery storages in their parking lots, internal parking lots, and using it to reduce the demand on their system so they can reduce their energy bill and getting paid by Con Ed. And so this is a very substantial opportunity. We think that New York can be a leader in this area because of the way we are approaching it, and we're both, I would say, very bullish on storage.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to go?
Thank you.
I have another set.
Any other?
Assemblyman
Okay, all you.
Engelbright? I'll pass. Thank you.
Senator Kruger, to close.
Thank you. Oh, no, Tom might have more.
Oh, you have one more?
Oh.
Okay.
Don't get too excited. It may not be to close. Thank you for spending so much time with us today. Maybe you answered, we sort of took both of your testimony out of order, and so I, in turn, have gotten a little confused in my thinking. And I believe this is a NYSERDA question. So in the Clean Energy Fund envision model, there's something called a pay-as-you-go funding model, where utilities collect funds and give them to NYSERDA as needed. I don't really understand how that works, and what happens if somebody along the way says, no, you don't have to give them to NYSERDA anymore? What happens to your funding then?
Well, this is probably a shared question.
Good, fine.
But in point of fact, what happens now is the collections are collected by the utilities.
Right.
And what happens now is that the utilities provide the money to NYSERDA on kind of a calendar basis, right? You're supposed to get $100 this year, here's the quarter, here come $25, like in that mode. The switch is that rather than being kind of automatic pilot, the transfers to NYSERDA are based on the needs. In part, that is a kind of a trust but verify aspect of the Public Service Commission and its oversight of NYSERDA. It's very clear that 10 years is a long time, $5 billion is a significant amount of money. We're extremely confident that it will succeed and that will produce the benefits that are promised, but just the duty of oversight requires that things ought to be milestone, and this is a very reasonable mechanism to have milestones with teeth.
So if I wasn't trying to understand right, you make the request, or whoever's sitting in your seat at that moment in history, and Audrey says, or whoever's sitting in her seat at that moment in history, says to the utilities, okay, you've collected it, now hand it over. Is that how it works?
There, in the Clean Energy Fund, we have it's really a schedule that when NYSERDA needs the funds, they will request it from the utilities, and utilities will be required to submit it. So the utilities are essentially collecting the funds on behalf of NYSERDA and holding them into an interest-bearing account. To your other question, the utilities are under an order from the Commission. So this isn't something that the utilities could simply say, no, I'm not doing it this year. They are required to comply under the order, and there's a target or an amount when NYSERDA says now it's time, that they will be required to pay it. So it's a way of basically, in a way, just holding the monies in escrow for NYSERDA so they're interest bearing, and so we could use that value to benefit ratepayers better.
And viewing it as an escrow type model, who gets the interest?
Ratepayers.
The ratepayers get it. Okay, thank you. Betty Little actually took my electric car question, although hers question was about upstate and coming across from Canada and the Northway. I'm convinced that the downstate area is ideal for expansion of electric cars because actually at the southern end of the state, the commute for people is usually far, far less mileage-wise. And so when you look at the maximum capability of electric cars, you know, it might be hard to go through upstate New York on one power-up. It's not hard at all to go around Staten Island or to go around Nassau or Suffolk, or even although we try to discourage everybody from using cars in the 5 boroughs, getting around the other boroughs with a car that has a 80-mile maximum, people will tell you that could be weeks worth. So what can the state do to encourage through public access of the electric refilling, they're not refilling stations, power stations.
Charging stations, yeah.
What can we do to really push the envelope there? Because I think other parts of the world have moved ahead much faster than we have, and I have to say, I just see it as a win-win environmentally for us and a good new economic model of cars for us to be supporting.
So we agree. Our view, we're studying the issue, but the conclusions are fairly clear that the state is primed for a much more active role to develop the electric vehicle, the zero-emitting vehicle market. That includes both ways to animate more purchase of electric vehicles and ways to get more charging stations out there in order to fuel the vehicles once they're out there. You're right. An important attribute of electric vehicles, some of the important attributes of electric vehicles mean that it is what they call an urban mode. It belongs in cities. And the final observation is that utilities recognize this, and they in fact are clearly thinking strategically and importantly and talking to the Commission mainly about ways in which they can be an important instrument for this.
Do you have anything to add since he handed it to you, so to speak?
Well, I think, as John said, the conversion of electric vehicles is a bit of a chicken and egg issue, right? The issue is the infrastructure is not there. And so one of the things that I know the downstate utilities are considering is that they can support the development of the infrastructure. And as a friend of mine recently said, that's why God invented utilities, to help with these types of things. And so it's something that we're actively looking at with them.
And do you think they get that, and they are exploring that?
For utilities, this is a way to build infrastructure, and that's one thing that they're in the business to do.
I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. One more speaker.
Thank you, Assemblyman Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both of you for your long stamina in this session. I just want to focus a little bit on RGGI and how those funds are being used per the executive proposal. The governor had announced, I think, actually in advance of his formal presentation, that EPF would be fully funded without RGGI funds at $300 million this year, and I think that announcement was greeted happily by a lot of folks who had advocated that RGGI funds not be transferred to cover costs of EPF last year. But the proposal, as I understand it, still effectively takes about $38 million. I think the number last year was $41 million. Takes $38 million and transfers it to the state general fund to cover some new new training programs at SUNY, and then also some tax credits. Can you just talk a little bit about each of those components, and in particular, why is it, given the tremendous challenges we've just been discussing today, why is it appropriate to use those RGGI funds to cover tax credits that in many cases predate RGGI itself?